I've struggled with various digestive issues over the years, so gut health is extremely important to me. Now, while gut health awareness has increased, it has led to a wellness trend that inspired a host of kind of questionable marketing claims and even false claims. You've seen the word probiotic attached to all kinds of supplements, drinks, and more, and they may claim to deliver the healthy microorganisms our guts need for proper function, but all too often the promises are really too good to be true. Thankfully, I became aware of a company called Seed and their flagship product, the Daily Synbiotic. That's right. Seed's Daily Synbiotic offers 24 clinically researched strains of microorganisms in a single dose. These strains support gut, skin, and heart health and promotes regularity, sometimes within as little as 24 to 48 hours. To me, what really sets Seed's Daily Synbiotic apart is its delivery system. This is my supply. While some products may offer the right strains, they are fragile and they rarely survive the trip through your gut. Seed uses a capsule-in-capsule design that helps ensure that 100% of the probiotics reach your colon where they matter most. Now, I've been taking Seed's Daily Synbiotic, and I encourage you to check out their story and the science behind what they do. To try it for yourself, just go to seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew for 20% off your first month of Daily Synbiotic. That is seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code DRW, Dr. Drew.
Hey everyone, it's a dose of Dr. Drew.
It's good to be back, everybody. Thank you all for joining us on the Restream. Next to me here is the one and only Bobby Chacon. You can follow him at Bobby Chacon, FBI, Chacon, not to be confused with how we spell it by putting an E on it periodically.
Don't confuse anybody.
So, Bobby, great to see you.
Good to see you, Doc. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. So, I got a lot I want to get into today. We're going to get into, Dr. Fauci just admitted today or yesterday that there are some concerns, very serious concerns about the Wuhan lab and what might have happened there. And I'm beginning to develop a sense that there's something really unique about this spike protein. Did you have COVID? Did you manage to escape, or you got it too?
I managed to escape it, and I have gotten both Pfizer vaccine shots.
Did you react to either of them?
I did. The first one, not bad, really sore arm and real lethargic for about 2 or 3 days. Real lethargic and very unlike me.
Yeah. I did J&J 2 days before all the concerns broke, but and I woke up with a spontaneous black eye on day 3, which was awesome.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is the presenting symptom of the transverse sinus thrombosis in the skull, which was the dreaded complication of the J&J vaccine. But I
have very sharp elbows.
But I had none of the other symptoms, so I just thought, it's a 0.003% risk, and I'm a male. It's not even been reported to males, so I thought it's just a coincidence, which was a weird one, but there it was.
So you got vaccinated after you had already had the virus?
Yes, because we're doing some international travel, and the airlines won't let you get on the planes without being vaccinated, and we were doing some back and forth to New York too, and having had the vaccine was just made it doable. I mean, you get no credit for having natural immunity.
He wants to have his papers.
Yeah, I've got papers that show my immunity, but you get no credit for that. So I risked my life and took a vaccine, and fine. But I'm developing a sense that there's something especially unique about this spike protein. And it makes me wonder, and I have these thoughts with peace and love. I don't want there to be international conflicts over it. I'm just a scientist, and I want to know what happened so we can better address it. And if they were monkeying with that protein, trying to give it certain properties that maybe we could now understand some of the reactions, we would then be able to, target our therapeutics in a way, or at least our expectations. Because as time has gone along, it's become increasingly clear to me that the vaccines cause sort of a mini COVID syndrome. They really do. And that's fine. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen with inoculations, right? But it's unique with the blood clots and the fatigue and the headaches and the back pain, and it's very unique. And I just thought, if we could have more information on what was going on in Wuhan.
Now, when you say they were trying to give the protein certain capabilities, certain qualities, is that what's kind of being known as gain of function research?
I don't know anything about gain of function research. I imagine that gain of function means making something deadlier and more contagious, right? Wouldn't that be gain of function?
That's when you give it more function than it has, you try to figure out how to stimulate it or how to change it, how to modify it so that it has a function that it didn't previously have, which in this case would be transmission.
A transmission, right. And I don't know if you saw that article in Medium. It was called like, let me see, shoot, I just ended up texting it to somebody. Now I can't remember the name. Here we go. I'm going to find the name of it for you real quick, because it's an article worth reading. You may have read it already, but it really is the best journalism I've seen in about 10 years. I'd given up on journalists until I read this article. And I thought, oh, there are still journalists out there. My God, this guy is amazing. And he just chronicled what happened with the vaccine and where all these counter narratives came from, particularly about bats and, pangolins and all this stuff. It was one guy who pushed this story. Here it is. It's called Origin of COVID Following the Clues. It was in Medium. A guy named Nicholas Wade. And I recommend the article most highly. It's a long article. He doesn't point a finger. He just puts the facts out there.
Right.
And it's not conclusive. I'm not going to tell you you're going to walk away going, oh my God, here's a smoking gun. You're going to walk away going, it's insane that we're not investigating this. That's what you're going to walk away with.
Well, that's the point too. And, I'm an investigator by nature and by training. And so that's really my concern, is that, the impact this had globally really dictates that we have a thorough, worldwide, objective investigation to this. And quite frankly, with all due respect to scientists, it shouldn't be conducted by the scientists. The investigation. So the investigation should be by trained investigators who know how to get to the bottom of something in a situation. And we will use, I was on the team, we would use scientists as our subject matter experts to school us on certain things. But because this has elements of international intrigue, it has elements of espionage, it has elements of all these things. Now, your brain could go in 1,000 different directions, but it does have some elements of international relations, and therefore we need people that are schooled up on that and investigate. Because what happens with scientists a lot of times, you have fellow scientists, and your allegiance to science transcends borders.
Yes.
And so sometimes that can get in the way.
Yes.
of good judgment.
Yes,
I'm afraid
that's
to
true.
say.
I never thought of that, but you now pushed my knowledge base forward by pointing that out. Let me tell everybody, Bobby spent 30 years with the FBI. Why don't you just describe your career? You were in how many years were you in the diving unit?
19 years in the diving unit. So underwater forensics for 19 years, but that time overlapped with my investigative time. I did the typical FBI training I went on in the 80s. So really we were gumshoes. We didn't have telephones. We didn't have computers. I went with 2 old-time agents and learned how to develop informants and work in the street and talk to people and follow evidence and follow trails. And a lot of it was interviewing people, interviewing a CEO on one day and a person that lives on the street in the next day, and being able to relate to each of them equally so that you can get valuable information from them. And so really I learned to conduct investigations, really the old fashioned way. And that served me very well as I went through my career. I did the Italian mob in New York City. I did gangs. I did Jamaican gangs in Jamaica and England and Canada. I did counterterrorism in Iraq investigation. So, I really covered the gamut in investigations. And so I know how to look at a situation and just kind of drive towards, what you're looking for, that final answer, where everything started from. And I think that's what's needed in this case.
And does your spidey sense sort of, give you, at least tells you that there's a road ahead that should be examined?
Yeah, I mean, we always used to have to predicate our investigation on something, right?
Yeah.
So you had to have something that in that first document that says to the boss, I want to start an investigation about this or on this person. And I think that you have what we used to call prima facie evidence of something that is a little amiss. I think there's plenty of that to start an investigation. Who is the investigation? And that's really what's going to determine how successful it is. Because, I mean, we've always known, if the past 4 years or longer has taught us anything about the political debates in this place, now we get this medical / scientific situation, and it shows us just how divided we are. I mean, we can't even have a vaccine without it becoming a left and right issue. And so I think who conducts the investigation is really an important part of it. And like I said, I think I don't think the WHO and I don't think the CDC should be running this as a primary investigation. They will follow the science, but there's more to it than the science.
Right. There's a large government agent, maybe a series of government agencies involved, and so that was, to me, sort of the first and most benign thing to examine, but one of the most meaningful things in terms of how the world responded to this damn thing, which was, why doesn't somebody investigate why the Chinese Communist Party did what it did in response to the outbreak in Wuhan? I don't know about you, but it looked to me, and it's why I was so upset, though it wasn't as clear to me at the time, it's very clear to me in retrospect, that it was either something that they had rehearsed and planned should something come out of that lab, or something that they slapped together, or something they slapped together to cover up, to hide something.
Yeah, to me, it's impossible to tell yet, but I think it could certainly be that they were playing with fire and they screwed up and then they tried to cover it up, right? And we've seen that in a lot of different situations, right? The cover up is always worse than the crime. But it's important to understand what happened in December of 2019 and January of 2020, when the Chinese government was putting pretty severe lockdowns in Wuhan and the surrounding provinces, and yet there were a number of countries that wanted to start prohibiting Chinese travelers from coming to their country. And the president of China, Xiaoping, he actually went and put the heavy hand on them and said, you will not restrict our people from traveling. Now, what Americans have to understand, and we don't have the perspective of this, is China is a global powerhouse. I mean, there are countries that rely on China for import, export, for energy, for tourism. And we all think, the U.S., we're also U.S. centric here, but China put a lot of pressure in January, February of 2020 to not restrict their people from traveling. So at the same time that the government is locking down Wuhan, it's forcing other countries to stay open to all these different tourists, all these different travelers from China. So I mean, it's almost like a malicious spread in that sense. If they were locking down Wuhan, they should have stopped everybody. I just don't think they may not have realized how much it had spread within China itself. But then and now it's being exported exponentially, right, because they're forcing countries not to prohibit people from China from traveling.
So I want to just have put this on the table ahead of this conversation as we go down this path, because I want to be clear. Obviously, we're not interested in increasing Asian hate. In fact, the opposite. We're interested in the opposite.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And so, I'm not convinced that the anti-Asian stuff has anything to do with this. I'm not convinced. That's another thing that would have to be investigated. Right?
Oh, I don't think so either. I mean, look, I spent a lot of time in the 1980s and early 1990s working in inner city New York City, where you had a very predominantly poor African-American community, and the only stores and markets and things were Asian American or Asian-born Americans working those all night.
Well, that's what happened with Koreans in South Central Los Angeles during the Rodney King. And
I always saw a tension between the African American community and the Asian community. That tension has existed for decades.
And to be fair, I can't speak on behalf of either community that live and work in those environments. Maybe this gave them the pretext or the excuse or whatever but somebody, I would argue that you need to investigate that too. Right?
Right.
Yeah. And so you can understand the impact of whatever your investigation about China is. You need to understand what's going on here as a result. I found it bizarre, though, that any and all conversation was shut down immediately for fear of causing anti-China sorts of sentiment.
Right.
Isn't that why they shut it down?
That gets in the way of an investigation.
Or is there some other reason they shut it down? Does your spidey sense tell you something else was getting?
Well, no, I think when you use that, it's like throwing the racism card around to put somebody off from having a discussion about an issue or something. Look, when you have to have an investigation, we know this originated in China. People don't complain as much when somebody calls it the South African variant.
Right.
People don't get up in arms and saying, "Oh, you're insulting the people of South Africa."
Right.
But we know it's a variant that originated in South Africa.
Right. Or Brazilian P1.
The Brazil one. Yes. Yeah. So, I don't know why there's that. And I think you're right. And like I said, the violence against Asians did not start with this. It did not start last year. It's well documented, in the history of the United States, particularly in larger cities like New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco. So I think that to play that card, it's first of all, it's not historically accurate. It's not true.
Right.
And second of all, it really obscures the ability to actually get to the bottom of this. And we should care because of the global impact this has had.
We should care because we should know what we're dealing with the Chinese government. And again, I'm prepared to hear that they had an exercise. See, what I'm bothered by is actually that the excesses of the Chinese government, the politicization of this pandemic was such that the press demanded that every other country, that our country particularly, follow the procedures followed by the Chinese government in Wuhan, and then in Italy. And then this is not in any textbook anywhere of medicine. This was a government response that was a pure, either a rehearsed emergency sort of procedure or an improvisation based on bureaucratic needs, not medical needs. This was not a medical intervention. And the fact that we had the the New York Times editorial boards demanding that everyone do the same thing. It's like, what is happening here? That was the most astonishing thing to me. And I made a mistake. I made a mistake of calling what they were doing a hoax. I wasn't saying the virus was a hoax.
Right.
I was saying they're trying to hoax us into a panic, which they did, and now we're dealing with the mental health consequences. So good.
And it would be interesting to go back and be able to start the virus in a different country, because the lockdowns that we went through could only be carried out, and like you said, we were forced to kind of start mirroring what they were doing.
Yeah.
Well, what they were doing could only happen in a completely totalitarian regime.
Yeah.
I mean, no other country in the world would be able to pull that off if it had the slight bit of democracy, in their government.
Yep.
It certainly couldn't have started here. We couldn't have started draconian measures like that and then have it spread to the rest of the world.
I'm not convinced that China would do those measures anywhere else. You know what I mean? I believe that it was either something they had planned should there be a problem with that virology lab, like they had an emergency service ready to go. I mean, the thing that stands out for me is the most bizarre. Do you remember the big tanker trucks going down the street with chlorine? That it was nonsensical. That was bizarre. And they were going day and night. And I thought, how did they have that ready to go? Right. I mean, think about it. It was ready to hand, and they executed it within 12 hours. And it was like, what is going on there? This is insanity. And then breaking up all the people that were sick and then shutting people up who were, going on social media and talking about it. That was not a medical intervention in any way.
So much of this is not medical.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I have a Home Depot right down the street from my house, and that never closed down one day. And so, there were people going in and out all the time, even during the most strictest of the lockdowns. So these lockdowns seemed, to me at least, so arbitrary and so capricious in some situations. The state of California was sued by Small Restaurant Owners Association.
Yep.
And all they wanted was to look at the data that California used to justify the indoor dining ban.
No, it was the outdoor dining ban. It was the outdoor dining ban.
There was an indoor dining ban.
Okay, also.
They asked the judge, can we see the data?
Yeah.
And if the data does show that indoor dining contributes to the spread, obviously it's common sense, but we want to see the data. And if the data shows what you say it shows, we'll be glad to shut down our restaurants inside. Yeah. The state would not turn over the data they used. And the judge agreed that the state did not have to turn that data over.
Well, they did the same.
We are still not seeing that.
Yeah, my son was involved in the outdoor restaurant suit. And at that point, they admitted they had no data. They have no data. But I think it was the Supreme Court of California, still said, well, it's an emergency, though, so they have to be able to do whatever they have to do.
Yeah, they have the right to make the decision in the public health emergency.
Right, without evidence, which to me, I think that will change going forward. That's insane. That's insane.
Well, that's another important thing you just hit on. Going forward, this is why we need an investigation, not only into the virus, how it started, how it spread, but into these measures that were put in place. We need a thorough investigation about what the results were. Did they actually save lives? We'll have the data now.
Yeah.
We need to study the data. Did masks save lives? Did social distancing save lives? On the surface, it seems common sense, but I don't want to see common sense. I've been told
very little in medicine, in biology generally, is commonsensical.
Right.
Everything has to be proven. Everything has to be proven.
And we need a plan going forward. If this happens again, we need a plan in place, and we need based in science, not in panic.
Yep. And I did an interview today where I was talking about the mental health consequences, and it's just profound. It's profound what's going to happen, particularly young people that are in development.
Here's the way I say it, Doc. I've always said, science should advise and inform public policy, but it should never dictate public policy.
Agreed.
And I'll give you a weird example, but science will tell you that if we drop the speed limit 10 miles an hour, we'll save 10,000 lives on the U.S. highways next year.
Mm-hmm.
If we cut out all cars together, we'll save 60 to 70,000 lives next year, of American lives. Or the next 10 years, 700,000 Americans will be saved. Do you care about those Americans? We always, the left will like to put you on your heels and say, well, you don't care about people because people are dying of COVID. People are dying of car accidents every single day. Does science tell us to take cars off the road, to stop driving? That would be science dictating public policy.
Right.
Okay.
And
science should inform public policy because we are making those balancing decisions all the time. 55 miles an hour, we lose this many Americans. And if 65, we lose this many.
If you
where are we going to strike that balance?
If you had offered this opinion and assessment 9 months ago, I could promise you 2 months of mob attacks on Twitter. Just for raising the issue.
And
get absolutely.
Censored.
And you get censored for saying it. Right. This thread would be censored for even bringing it up on a stream.
And that's a huge problem. Huge problem going forward.
It's pretty crazy, right? I mean, can you imagine we're having this conversation? It's really something.
It might be.
Like I said, I want somebody to show me the science that, my mom and pop hardware store that I usually shop at because I like to support local businesses, it was any more dangerous than the Home Depot that I could go in 24/7 anytime I wanted.
Susan's father owned hardware stores most of his later adult life, and he worked every day of his life till he was 92 in his hardware store, and developed heart failure and died 2 weeks, left the store, died 2 weeks later.
But he would not have even worn a mask.
Well, we always laugh about the fact that he'd be in there without a mask, screaming at everybody.
Screw you. I'd rather die than live through this.
And he had lots of fans like you supporting his business for
he would have stayed
years,
open.
It
was
but look what happened. I mean, you have that restaurant in Burbank that got boarded up,
Flats.
literally,
Tin Horn Flats.
I mean, literally boarded up. The police came and boarded it up. I mean, that's we haven't seen action like that in the American public. I don't know when. I mean, certainly I don't remember it in my lifetime.
I will tell you where that happened once. In a period, roughly 70 years ago, people have been embarrassed by it. They're schooled in how awful it was their entire adult life. Arthur Miller wrote a play about it called The Crucible, and it was the communist panic in the 50s, right?
Right.
And we're doing it again. It's really something else. I don't know what was going on then that's similar now. I don't know.
And the fact that such a large percentage of Americans are rallying around this kind of government behavior and actually supporting it and cheering it on because it's perceived as being forced on their political opponents.
Right.
So they're for it and they're cheering it.
And again,
if it was being exercised against somebody that they perceived as their political ally, they wouldn't be so happy with it.
But that's the problem with experiences like this. It always goes both ways. The guillotines go up, and then whoever put somebody on a guillotine ends up on the guillotine. That's right. That's the way it goes. That's how history, these kinds of events, sort of move forward through history. Well, let me take a little break from the Wuhan conversation. I want to go back to it in a few minutes and talk about maybe some more specifics about what you think might be going on there. But before we do, you have a new television program coming up. I want to show a little clip of it. You want to tell us about it? Set it up?
Sure. I went with a team of 5 other experts, archaeologists, technical experts, outdoors experts, down into the mountains of Peru and the jungles of Brazil. And we went in search of solving a mystery of 3 explorers that all went looking for the same lost city. And I can say more after the clip, but we went in looking for what happened to these 3 explorers that went in on separate occasions and never came out.
What was the time frame of these people you were following?
1980, 1984, and 1987.
Sheesh. And what? These are 3 different.
3 different expeditions. The only thing that tied them together, they all went in with the same guy, and only he came out.
Uh-oh. No concerns about, did you look into that guy? Let's look.
We sure did.
Let's look at the tape here. Here we go.
team of 6 investigators are on a double mission.
We're going to go deeper and farther than almost anyone has ever gone.
To find out if Akakor and Akahim are real,
There's no way that this is a natural structure.
and to discover what happened to the missing and murdered explorers.
There was a big hole in the back of his head.
That will be on Discovery coming up.
Discovery starting May 26th, Wednesday night. Every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. You'll be able to see new episodes. Our first episode will premiere this Wednesday, May 26th. And the origin of the story started in the 1970s when a German journalist based in Rio de Janeiro, who covered a monthly magazine in Germany, he covered all of South America, starts hearing rumors about a guy who walked out of the deep Brazilian Amazon and took residence in a very small outpost fishing village on the edge of the Amazon. And he starts hearing these rumors that this guy is the last remaining survivor of this underground city, one of these secret cities. And the guy's father was the chief. So he goes up there and he interviews this guy. He finds him. He goes way up into the Amazon and finds this guy and writes a book called The Chronicle of Akakor. Akakor being one of 2 cities, Akahim and Akakor. One is in Brazil and one is in Peru, and they're sister cities, both subterranean. And the chief runs both cities, and this obviously the cities die off, and and he walks out of the jungle and he takes a residence and he says, I can take people in there. So he starts kind of a guide business, and he starts taking people in, charging people to take them in. Nobody ever finds it. There's always reasons, to not find it. So this little outpost village is literally the last stop before there's nothing beyond this into the Amazon, except those tribes that you always hear about that have never had outside contact and stuff. So he takes a series of people in there, either weather or terrain, or he says the Indians are mad at us, we have to back out. Nobody ever makes it in there. And he takes many, many people. But in 1980, he takes a young man from San Francisco in, and the young man is never found again. In 84, he takes a Swiss gentleman in there, and he's never seen again, except his body is found a year later by other travelers, and there's a bullet hole in the back of his head. And then a German Swiss woman in 1987 goes down there because they all read this book and they all get enamored with this guy, and they all think he's this prince of this lost civilization. And she kind of falls in love with him, and then he takes her into the jungle. She's never seen again. And so, we do an investigation. We go in. I have a geologist, a PhD in geology. We have a tech expert with
Uh-oh. Froze. I bet he'll come back. Hold on a second. Oh, no. Well, this is a for real freeze this time. Bobby, I don't know if you hear me, but you have frozen on our stream here. I don't know if there's a...
Before in this case.
There he is. Wait, okay.
And we do an investigation.
Bobby, we lost you for a second. I think you talked a lot in the middle of that.
Yeah, we lost you after the woman that went in and didn't come back.
Yeah, so she's never seen again. And then the German, to add more flavor to this, the German journalist in Rio now starts hearing about people disappearing.
Yeah.
And and spurred people to go to this guy, and maybe this guy is doing something untoward to these people. And so he quits his job with the magazine, and he enlists the help of a professor up there of indigenous studies up there in the Amazon. And he quits his job, and he's about to travel up there to try to put this to rest. Is this a hoax or is it not? And he has dinner in Rio de Janeiro with his replacement that the magazine sends to be his replacement there. And they have dinner on the last night. He's all packed to go up to the Amazon. And he's shot and killed on the streets of Rio de Janeiro in an attempted robbery, but they never ask for money. They just walk up, shoot him dead, and take off.
That's interesting.
And he was the one that was going to go and see whether the book he had written 15 years earlier was responsible for these missing people. And so we go to Rio and we investigate his shooting as well, and we go way up into the Amazon and into the mountains of Peru. And I think we do a good job at showing I think really what happened to these people.
How did you hear about it? This
from the book,
Akakor.
really, from the book and the legend. There's this legend of these lost cities. El Dorado.
When you say subterranean, you mean that they're now been subsumed by the jungle, not that they lived underground. They lived underground.
Yeah, they lived underground. They lived. If you read the book, he talks about I mean, in reality, geologically, it's probably a cave system. It's a system of underground caves and things that had opened up, and they lived in this interlocking cave system. But the way it's described is this subterranean hidden city.
Wild. And
Yeah.
was it just another native, sort of Brazilian sort of ecosystem? Was there anything special about their race or background, or you know what I mean? Or was just humans finding an ecological niche and living there?
Yeah, I think that if you read up on the the history and the myths of El Dorado and of a lot of those lost cities of gold down there, these tribes they've been there for thousands of years.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, we look forward to that. And I thought of you when we were in this a shooting in Brooklyn at a steakhouse. You don't worry, Susan. I'm not going to go strike back. I don't think here right just yet. But some of the training over the years you've given me about active shooter situations came in quite handy. And kind of kept me kind of sound mind during the whole thing. I was sort of surprised.
You came to mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. These things happen so fast, and before you know it, you're in the middle of it and you're acting on instinct, which is why I've always advised people to stay situationally aware of your surroundings, of things. Where's the nearest place to duck under? Where's the nearest place to get out? Always know where your exits are, especially now.
So here's what was, I remember those words many times being spoken by you to me.
Me too.
And so we did an assessment, and we ended up all packed in the corner on the ground with 35 of our closest friends now. And
I was on the bottom.
I saw the video.
But my wits remained about me, much to my surprise. I was surprised. So I thought, okay, all right, there's the emergency exit. But for all I know, that's where the shooter is, outside that door. Because we had no idea. We really had no idea what we didn't know. Was it a drive-by? Was it a mass shooting event? Was it? We had no idea. And at the time, by the time we got all huddled in place, the cops were literally there in about less than 2 minutes. It was amazing.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, in LA, we'd still be on hold with 911, right? for sure. And they were there. And then the next thought was, well, is it going to be a shootout? Is that what's going to happen now? So I started again trying to channel my inner Bobby Chacon, and I was in a window. Everyone else sort of stuffed down in front of me, but I thought there were people behind me. I'm going to try to put a table in the window to see if we can at least block this window, because I really don't think we should make a break for that exit, because it's too ill-defined. We have no idea what's going on. So at least just get cover. And by the time I was into that and dumping shit on the floor, they were calling it. It was already over.
No, but I mean, that's good. You have to act that fast. And look, later on, if it turns out that you seemingly overreacted, where's the harm?
Right.
It's better to overreact in those situations than underreact in those situations.
Yeah, it's
always
interesting. It's interesting. Social constraints still play upon you, even in emergencies. Because I remember as I hesitated turning the table over because I started dumping shit all over the floor, and I'm like, well, I don't want to dump everything. It's like,
politeness comes into play, decorum, all of that. But
I should not have done any of that.
But in reality, like I said, and I don't think anybody would ever fault you for overreacting in that situation, especially when bullets are flying.
Well, it was interesting. I will tell you that for me, I think that the calm demeanor of the staff who were accounting for everybody, stood upright, kept their cool, that made massive difference in my own reaction. So isn't that interesting too? So
that's what always makes me proud to be a native New Yorker, in that, we've been through a lot in that city, and, people do have the ability to stay calm in, the most harrowing
extraordinary situations. Yeah. And everybody go to Peter Luger just to support the waiters, because they were exceptional. What part of New York did you grow up in?
Well, my family's from Queens, but I grew up on Long Island.
What part?
Oh, Babylon, West Babylon.
Okay. So
in Suffolk County, the South Shore of Suffolk County.
Nice.
And I went to Hofstra Law School out there. Same.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question really quick.
Yeah.
So in New York, it's a little sketchier now than it was.
A lot sketchier now, but it's better
a couple
now.
Years ago.
No. I got to tell you, it's way worse than a couple years ago. But Susan, I was there last week, and it's like 10% improvement every month. It's like the New Yorkers are taking over the streets again from the, frankly,
Well,
criminals.
I just
That's really
think
what's
that,
out there.
that the people are taking advantage of their power there, and they're making people nervous. And it makes, as a woman, I feel nervous walking the streets of New York. And you know, I know that you used to have this thing called the DAD, or this like taser that would, or pepper spray that would email somebody if you were in trouble or whatever. And I don't know, do you still believe in stuff like that, or what is?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I have two sisters, and we were raised by an NYPD sergeant detective, and my brother was a NYPD sergeant. And so, and when I'm talking to my wife or my niece now, or my sisters, I mean, they've always grown up with having whatever legal protections that they can have to protect themselves.
Do you have
Whether
recommendations?
that's mace.
Yeah, should everyone carry mace if you're going on the subway in New York? I mean,
Yeah, I would. I mean,
Do they still make that one with that works with your phone? It calls you.
I don't know. I don't know, because I carry a weapon, right? So I carry a firearm everywhere I go, and so.
So go out with Bobby.
But those people that don't, I always advise those people that don't have something. Have some, because quite frankly, especially if it's a street criminal, a lot of times at the first sign of resistance, they take off. I mean, you don't even have to get into the fight. If you show them some resistance, if you spray them with a little mace, sometimes if it's a lower level street criminal that just wants money for drugs or something like that, sometimes the first bit of resistance, they take off, and that's all you need. So I always say, have something to defend yourself, whether it's legally, by the way, and different places have different laws about what's allowed. If mace is allowed, carry mace.
Somebody said they want to carry brass knuckles.
yeah, a friend of ours said that those are A, not legal, and B, I told them they're going to pull it out of your hand and use it on you.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
That's what I'm worried about. Like, I
And they're
don't wanna
not.
get
And then
mace.
one thing I will say too, because of that, exactly what you just said, you have to use brass knuckles. You have to punch somebody really hard for them to
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
If you're going to punch them really hard with brass knuckles, guess what? Your knuckles all get broken.
Yeah.
So just punch them with your fist. But if you're going to carry something, or if you think you're going to punch somebody, go to a gym and practice punching somebody,
Yeah.
or go to somewhere outside and practice spraying that mace. Just whatever you use, whatever is your chosen defense tool, make sure you use it. You don't have to use it all the time. I go shooting 3 or 4 times a year to keep my qualifications up, but use it 2 or 3 times a year and make sure you're comfortable with using it. You don't want to pull it out and look at it and say, which end does it come out of?
Right.
Because you haven't looked at it in a
Right?
year.
Right, smart.
Make sure you test.
Yeah,
it.
I think that's
Don't
good.
do it up downwind.
You're right.
I think that this is actually important information, actually, because we need to take the streets back. I mean, it was opportunism and really getting wild. You can't ride the subways anymore and stuff. That's not.
Well, look what happened only in the last couple of days in New York and LA and Chicago with Hamas supporters, going after Jewish people that are, sitting outside in a restaurant eating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's mob rule some places. We've never seen that kind of activity, on the streets of New York. As bad as it was with crime, we never saw Hamas supporters openly parading around in these caravans, jumping out and attacking Jewish people. I mean, I can't remember. I grew up there, and I can't ever remember that happening.
It doesn't sound different to me than so many of the other things that are happening in major cities all over the country. I don't know which group or which side or whatever, but
that's right. I mean, look, we've just gone through 3 or 4 years of saying the White House is encouraging this type of people. The White House is encouraging that type of people. Well, I mean, the same could be said now. I mean, silence sometimes means acquiescence, and silence of leadership, silence. You have the squad, you have AOC, you have these other members of Congress who are constantly comparing Hamas with Israel. And Hamas supporters with Israel, this is the Palestinians and the Israelis are actually on one side and Hamas is on the other.
Right.
It's not a Palestinian-Israeli thing, and so you have members of Congress who are throwing fuel on this fire, and for the White House to remain so silent.
Well, to be fair, Biden did come out, I think, yesterday, pretty strongly against the hate against Jewish folks. So. I mean,
but he's got to come out and he's got to address members of his own party and members of Congress who are actually doing this, who are actually fanning those flames.
I think you're right, I was thinking, previous administration, if you had taken this long to respond, they would have said, "See, that's proof that he hates them." It's like, no,
right, exactly.
I am not playing that game on either side. I'm going to give Biden the benefit of the doubt. He spoke up. Let's see if he keeps speaking up, and I hope he does.
Right.
And to be fair, the whole thing, I'm on a scientific call every couple of weeks, and one of the scientists that I interact with is a man that's in Israel, been there forever, and he sleeps in a bomb shelter. He goes, that's what we do here. And he goes, but you should understand, I thought this was an interesting insight. He goes, this is all politically motivated. It's not going to solve anything. Hamas wants to show that Palestinians should stand behind them. Netanyahu wants a common enemy, so he gets a coalition together, and both sides won, right? But both sides are declaring a victory, and it was all politics, which to me, well, this is one of the things that if that's true, which it sounds like it was, what we are complaining about, what you and I have been talking about here, is kind of a worldwide phenomenon. The mob rule and the excesses and the, you know what I mean? And
oh yeah,
it's worldwide, which I find, that's the part I find a little mystifying. I mean,
even in this discussion, here, I mean, Hamas wins when you term it the way you just did. You know, they're trying to do one thing and Israel's trying to do another. Yeah. They win because now they've elevated themselves. They're a designated terrorist organization. Yep. That's what they are. Israel is a state. It's a country. It belongs to the UN. I mean, it is a recognized government. Yep. So, Palestine, the two-state solution, obviously, most of Israel supports that. Yep. But this is an issue about Hamas, and you cannot, and I will not, equate Hamas with the government of Israel.
Fair enough. And by the way, wasn't it nice that the accord that Jared Kushner put together seemed to hold during all this?
Right.
Which was kind of extraordinary, I thought.
I mean, I liken Hamas getting elected to leadership positions in Palestine to the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. I mean, if you look at Afghanistan in the 50s, it was a beautiful place. In the 60s, it was a beautiful place. They had open universities. Women were teaching. Women were doctors. Women were going to school. When a terrorist organization gets elected or takes over a country and has, fake elections to take power, that does not make them no longer a terrorist organization. Right. And Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Right. Let's go back to Wuhan for a second. Do you have a hypothesis what happened there, or I'm sure
no, I mean, look, I think that ranges from a screw up that they tried to cover up to something more sinister.
Like they intentionally released something?
I don't really see that, but I want to know why they did not lock down the whole country when they realized they had a problem. And they let their,
What if it's that they thought they had emergency procedures in place in Wuhan? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that was their procedure, which it looked to me like it was, like a preordained, pre-practiced, loaded, with the chlorine trucks and all that BS, that this was an orchestrated, choreographed dance that they had anticipated, expected it to work. And I think that's why they felt they could allow people to travel from other regions. Yeah.
I mean, look, and I'm no scientist, but if that's the case, if how you just described it, then there was a colossal underestimation of what they were dealing with.
Yes, I think that's true.
And how do any credible scientist underestimate that much?
Well, I mean, think about it. But Bobby, think about it. They were messing with the virus. They were, what do they call it? Enhanced, whatever. What do they call it? What's the euphemism?
Gain of function.
Gain of function, whatever. They didn't know what it would really do. They didn't give it to humans, right? They didn't, and they certainly didn't know what it would look like out in the world. They had it in an in vitro situation, right? In a glass.
Doc, when I was working on the Amerithrax case in 2001, 2002, and I went down to Fort Detrick in Maryland, and my dive team was diving for the clean boxes that the mailer used. He would put it in the lab in the box and then take the box home, and he had the gloves in the box.
This is for the anthrax. This is the anthrax.
The anthrax case, right? We called it Amerithrax, and that was the code name for the case. Mm-hmm. And I got to see some of the procedures at Fort Detrick where they were using, where they were dealing with weaponized, things. Boy, let me tell you something. I couldn't even figure out how a virus would ever get out of there. And if you ever got infected, you'd never get out of there. I mean, the procedures were so in place, was so strict. I mean, it was amazing to me. It was like something out of a movie, like I have never seen. The levels of contamination, decontamination, the showers you had to go through, all of the different levels underground where this stuff was. I liken it to, our nuclear program and all the safeguards we have compared to the Russians, and why a Chernobyl happens there and a 3 Mile Island happens here. Three
Right.
Mile Island worked exactly the same way, except we avoided a meltdown because our systems were in place to protect against something like that. And 3 Mile Island happened. It was an accident, and the meltdown contained everything.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the procedures in place, they don't have the regulations that we have. They have a Chernobyl. This is the same thing. If something like this, if Wuhan happened at Fort Detrick, you would never hear about it. You may get 1 or 2 people in the lab sick, and then the public would never be a threat, and the public would never hear about it, in my opinion.
And so the point being is that this is not as carefully managed a lab.
Clearly.
Well, it kind of fits with, I'm just going to say, as I understand, the communist view of humanity is not exactly that every life matters. You know what I mean?
Of course not. Right.
Or when life is too many.
Yeah, it's really that the system is what matters, and the party is what matters, and those are the priorities. And,
Right.
That's right.
And
that's why you put a lab like that out in the country, right? Because the collateral damage that might occur is probably acceptable losses to them.
And I bet you could still make the case that because it was such an exquisitely contagious respiratory virus, I mean, this is really kind of an
And it takes like 3 days for you to really get it.
Yeah, or you may not know you have it and that kind of stuff. But that this sort of a novel quality to it that maybe they weren't prepared for, because we still don't know, the transmission and all the details on transmission, how transmission works, are really still not worked out. And maybe there's something.
No, and I mean, that's why it's so important to take politics out of this and to do a really thorough, objective investigation into what happened and then our steps and what we did about it. And the U.S. has to look at itself and say, like, look, if Florida and Texas had different procedures in place and they were affected differently on it, why is that? If California and New York got hit the hardest, but they had this most strictest lockdown, why is that? I mean, again, taking politics out of it, look at the data. The data is there. We're almost on the verge of finishing and getting all the data, but we have to analyze that.
One of the reasons I'm interested in the Wuhan lab is that if indeed something did happen there's going to be a lot of people that are going to have to explain themselves. Why they demanded the counter narratives and why they refused to allow the investigations to go forward. And to me, that is such a model, sort of a lock and key for what we have to do with so many aspects of this thing, because people aren't asking the questions. They're not looking at things. They're really not holding people accountable for some of their choices and behaviors.
Again, it could be also that the people that we put in charge of this investigation could be complicit in some of that, and they could see their own culpability. And so they don't want those answers because those answers might make them not look so good.
Well, that's what that article was suggesting. There's some of that going on.
Clearly, that's why the
article,
scientists should not be in charge of this investigation.
I'm going to send you that article right now because I don't think you've read it. It's going to blow your mind.
No, I haven't, but I look forward to it. I will. I mean, look, I think that, I think Dr. Fauci and his boss, every time they come back to the Hill, they should be put under oath. They haven't been under oath. I think they should be put under oath every time they're back on the Hill now. I think that should be standard practice.
That's interesting. Why have they not been?
Ask Congress. That's not my call, but that's, in some of those briefings, I think we're getting to the point where we need people making statements on the record under oath, because that's the direction we're heading. There's, whether or not Dr. Fauci gave a grant to that company that was then doing business with the Wuhan lab and that gain of function and him kind of changing his positions or changing the wording of some of his positions. As an investigator, those are the things I kind of look at when people change their behavior under certain circumstances. Sometimes there's plausible reasons for that change in behavior, and sometimes there's not.
So one of the reasons that people have gotten squirrely on, say, the sort of the CDC side is that the priorities of public health are we're all thrown out during this thing for some reason, but one priority emerged, which was everyone's got to be unified in their position, which is a good idea in public health messaging, that everyone's saying the same thing, but it became like a religion on the public health side, and it ran amok of the priority of science, which is to challenge and to examine and re-examine and don't accept anything from anybody and be in this constant discourse. That's the priority of science. That got completely, I don't know a strong enough word. Yeah, it got completely
thrown out.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the more rigorous that process is, the stronger the better, science is on the other end as it comes out of that process.
100%. And any scientist who has real training, well, that's what they're trained to do, is to challenge, to stand up to challenges and to challenge their peers. Not because they're bad people, because that's how you do science. And that became anathema in the name of, we got to all be saying the same thing. You know, anybody that said anything otherwise, well, you're on this side, or you're on the right side, you're on the left side, you're on Trump's side, you're on Biden's side. It all became only about that, which is so far from science. It really got disgusting.
It's not only in science. I mean, when I used to take a case to trial, before we went to trial, we had a mock moot court, and it was about tearing your case apart. So I would be there, I would be justifying, and I would have colleagues come in and just try to rip my case apart from every different angle, my evidence, and do this and that, because I knew there'd be a defense attorney, a well-paid defense attorney with well-paid private investigators doing the same thing, trying to rip my case apart. I knew it had to be bulletproof. And so that rigorous process, you talk to somebody who got their PhD, right? When you have a dissertation, it's all about attacking the hypothesis, and you have to defend your thesis. You have to defend it. And sometimes that process is not very comfortable.
No.
I understand that. Yeah. But again, the strength of what comes out on the other side is determined by how rigorous that process is.
And, Bobby, your wife has worked with the International Olympics. What's going to happen there going forward?
Well, right now, I mean, it looks like the games are going on. They're coming up, you know, and there's a lot invested. And the last I heard that Tokyo is going ahead. And I don't think they're having international spectators. I think it's all at home. But I mean, you have thousands of athletes traveling there and stuff. And I haven't looked at their numbers recently as far as Japan's doing. But from what I hear, the games are on. And I know, like in this country, you know, the NFL just announced that in September, all NFL games are going to have 100% capacity. So you're starting these stadiums.
Zero outdoor transmission.
If you're vaccinated.
Yeah. Do you have to be vaccinated, or do you have to show vaccination or anything?
I did not hear that. Yeah. I don't know.
There's been 2 cases out of 7,000 in terms of outdoor transmission, and that was before vaccine time. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're obviously here in this country, we're turning the corner, but internationally, I mean, it's a little dicier. My wife in September has the youth Pan American Games down in Cali, Colombia, and she was making monthly trips down to Cali once a month for a week.
Oh boy!
And those have now been put on hold. The State Department has stopped people from traveling down there. Number one, because the COVID's gotten so out of hand, but number two, that they're rioting and there are strikes against the corruption in government with respect to the distribution of the vaccine. And so it's gotten to be a real situation down there. So her trip this month was canceled. Hopefully they'll be able to settle things out and she'll start going again. And the youth Pan American Games down in Colombia will get held this September. But, you know, we're right on the cusp of the time, whether or not the tipping point, whether or not things are going to be open or things are going to go shut down in those places, not here.
I understand.
But in some of those other places.
Well, my friend, this has been, as always, enlightening, fun. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with everybody. Before we kind of wrap up, tell them again about the show, where they can see it, what the arc is that they should look forward to without giving away too much.
Sure. We will tell you the story of these 3 explorers on 3 different expeditions in the 1980s who went in. We will tell you what they went looking for, the city of Akakor and the city of Akakim, where they went. We'll describe to you the legends and what was. But we will go to those places and we will find things that may relate to those legends. And then myself and my partner, who's an Irish investigative journalist, will follow the trail of possible criminal activity on this. Were these people murdered? Is there any evidence that foul play happened to these people? I can tell you at least once there is some evidence of foul play happening. And so it's every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. on Discovery Channel. It's called The Curse of Akakor.
Akakor is one of the 2 cities. Thing?
Well, my partner, Paul Connolly, was an investigative journalist. He is an investigative journalist. He's Irish descent. He's based in London. But we have Meg Hine, who's our wilderness, she's Bear Grylls wilderness safety expert.
Oh, wow.
She got us in and out of every difficult situation. We have a geologist with us. We have a tech expert with drones with us. We have a wilderness medical doctor because we are so far from being able to get medical help.
The medicine in that environment, that's a specialty of its own. I mean, my God.
And she's an incredible doctor, number one.
Oh.
But in addition to being a medical doctor and a wilderness medical expert, she has climbed the south face of Everest. She has climbed the north face of Everest. She has summited Everest twice. She has climbed K2. She has walked across a volcanic lava bed. She is very comfortable in any condition.
And I would just say that's one knowledge base, but medical knowledge base, it's obscurity. It's obscura that you can run into. Anybody get sick with anything weird or bites or anything?
A couple of times, yeah. I think it was mostly digestive stuff, and she was able to actually fashion. She carried what she could with her, but she was actually able to fashion some wilderness remedies for us with different leaves. She's native Brazilian anyway. So yeah, we didn't have any like orthopedic things like broken ankles or anything like that, luckily. But we had some stuff. We had some spider bites and things like that. There were tarantulas the size of small basketballs.
Wow. And the small basketballs, what would you go? At least a small basketball.
A small basketball. What is
We had to
that?
sleep in hammocks suspended off the jungle floor.
course, yeah.
Because if the mosquitoes didn't get you, the spiders would.
But then what about
I had a cougar, a wild cougar.
I was going to say, what about the jaguars and stuff?
I think it was actually a jaguar
Yeah.
and two babies, or two adults and a baby, swim across this river right in front of our canoe.
Oh.
And it looked back and hissed at us because it was protecting its baby. We got that close to it.
Of course.
But all kinds of wildlife that you'll see in there.
And
the caimans and the crocodiles and things like that.
Are you and Jim still producing stuff?
We are. Well, we just finished America's Most Wanted.
So tell them, people, is that website still up and operating?
XG Productions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tell people about that.
xgproductions.com.
Tell people
Yeah,
about
so
that.
XG Productions is a collection of former FBI, CIA, DEA. Many of us have former government jobs, and we are producers and writers and directors. And we just finished the new reboot of America's Most Wanted. We're waiting here, but we put 5 episodes on the air. We're waiting to hear back from Fox if they want a full season, starting again this fall. We're doing all kinds of different, we just signed a first look deal with CBS. So CBS wants to see our stuff before anybody else does.
Great.
We're working on both scripted and true crime, unscripted true crime and then scripted, crime shows. So we're in the thick of it. We're busy with this stuff every day. xgproductions.com.
All right, my friend.
The letter X, the letter G.
XG, right? XG Man.
Oh.
XG
Yeah,
Man.
exactly.
XG
What did I
Productions.
put up there?
What did you put up there?
Oh, wait, did I do right? Yes,
XG
XG. I
Productions.
did. Look at that.
All right, Bobby. Take care. It's been too long.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully
It
we'll
was
see you
great
soon.
being with you again. Thanks
you always, my
again.
friend. Okay.
Anytime.
You're the best.
Bobby Chacon.
Thank you.
At
Thanks,
Bobby
Susan.
Chacon FBI is where you continue to follow him, and XG Productions. Susan, do you put it up there?
Yes, I
XG.
did.
And then I wanted to quickly, before we wrap up the show, somebody was asking about long-term. What did Kendra want here? Hold on.
I saw that.
Yeah, what did she say?
The news continues to not talk about long-term health effects.
Yeah,
of COVID-19.
Kendra, I called her Condra. Kendra, I don't know what news you're listening to, but this is a preoccupation of the news these days. I'm happy to discuss it with you. Please ask any specific questions. You can go to covidlonghaulers.com. Dr. Yogendra and Dr. Patterson have set up a cohort there. They're looking at some other things as well, in addition, whether it's related to vaccine reactions or related to COVID or whatever it might be. They are at the cutting edge of what's going on with any of the long-term health consequences of this virus. So you can also, Steve Kirsch is also writing a lot about this now. He's very concerned about how the World Health Organization, the NIH, has been approaching their policy around particularly treatment for early aspects of the illness and how that might prevent the longer term consequences. So, Kendra, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Let's see. I'm trying to find your other notes here if you have any. But I had a long hauler syndrome, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about it. There are definitely lots of long-term consequences.
COVIDlonghaulers.com.
COVIDlonghaulers.com, that's right.
With Dr. Yo.
And you can also follow Dr. Yo for more information. Yo, the word Dr. Yo, Y-O Dr. Yo, Yo Dr. Yo.
Sign up. Go get help. They're there to help.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're friends of ours.
Yep. I don't see anything else. So I'm going to wrap this thing up.
Well, did you know that Joe Giannotti has a new podcast?
I did not. Let's hear about it.
It looks like it's called Joe's Place Podcast. I think.
It's great.
Nobody really.
Andrew Ashkashvili, New York was better. It's better.
I still am afraid I'm going to get
it's
some mace.
still not itself by any means. I think, Susan, you should. I agree with that. Apparently, you have to buy the mace in New York. Now, you may have to apply for it.
That's fine.
But, yeah, New York was, it's still sketchy, but it's better. An on-the-ground update from New York, we're going back in 2 weeks.
Just for a day, though.
Yeah, just for a short stay. But it was, it's great. It's still great, and the New Yorkers were great, and they're opening up that floating island on the west side down in the 20s. That's amazing.
Drew's very excited about that.
It's open now, and I ran by it. And I was like, oh, my God, it's a big deal, Susan. It's a big deal.
I know. I can't wait.
Yeah, and
we don't have a lot of time to
It's
do
got
that,
an amphitheater in it. It's got all kinds of stuff. It's crazy how much stuff is there. But anyway, thank you, Crepe Suzette. Let's see, papers.
I'm glad you guys like that topic. I mean, I woke up this morning, I saw that article, and I said, I'm going to call Bobby Chacon.
He's great. He's always a good interview. And if anybody's writing, he's happy to advise you if you're writing investigative kinds of television or novels or whatever it might be.
I have the doctor that you wanted tomorrow, the psychiatrist, I think it was.
Oh, which one?
The one you gave me today.
The
one I said I'd have. No, I told.
Oh, the woman. Yes. Good. Okay, the other woman. Yes.
Michelle. I'm sorry, I didn't make a banner.
All right, so we're back, everybody. Now, that's what it's like with us gone for a week. And in June, we're going to be gone for how many weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, starting June 10th. Is that about right, Susan? 11th?
We're leaving the 11th.
Okay, so June 10th.
And then we're coming back the 26th or 27th.
And Anthony Brown is saying on the stream that he felt abandoned by us.
I said hello to you every day.
Yeah, Anthony, we got to look at those. If you actually felt that way, I would look at those abandonment issues. Talk to your sponsor, please, because we need to work on that.
Somebody said Bobby's job sounds so fascinating. Steven Springle, Twitch
what
loves Bobby.
I'd never contemplated is that I had 30 plus years in medicine, much the way doing.
Bobby's been in the FBI
the same amount of time doing. Excessive. We were both workaholics in our respective field, and now we're trying to use that to sort of.
Yeah, but he and his wife both take a lot of risks.
What do you mean?
I mean, he's like both of their jobs are really harrowing.
Not anymore. Not so much. Although that particular program is harrowing. You're right. He's not afraid to do stuff. That's for sure.
He's not.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Well, listen. It's a pleasure.
He's a fun guy.
He's great.
I like him.
Pleasure to be back. How's Bert doing in Serbia? I think he may be back by now.
Oh, is he in Serbia?
He's been in Serbia for quite some time.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah. And we appreciate you guys on the stream. We appreciate you all supporting us. I'll try to get out there on social media again this week and do some other stuff. And I'll be in your mom's house. Check it out. Check it out. Your mom's house is alive and well. And Annie and I have a conversation. I think it'll be aired in about 2 weeks, and you do not want to miss that conversation. It was one of the most extraordinary conversations I've ever had. I don't know what they're going to name it, but it's about Annie.
It's called Getting Real Cool with the Booth Boys.
No, that's a different one. That's this
week.
That was a cool conversation, but this is Annie and his bowel habits get real.
Oh,
I think it's going to be something in there.
I'm in that show.
Yes, I called Susan in that show too. Because
I want Christina to come home.
You mean you want me to? Oh, so I don't call you?
I want her to.
You want her back? She'll be back. They've been busy. So
and there's still Rational Revolution mugs back. I think they got more.
Oh, let's get that Rational Revolution out there, everybody. It's time. The tides are turning. I feel like the rationality. Just this conversation I had with Bobby felt like part of the Rational Revolution. It feels like we can have. For me, just so you guys know, many people on the stream go, where's the Rational Revolution? The Rational Revolution is us being able again to have rational discourse. That's the rational. That's the first principle of the Rational Revolution. Is being pragmatic and having the conversations openly without being censored. So it feels like the Rational Revolution is beginning to take hold a little bit. So
yeah.
What's the matter, Susan?
Well, Mary Carey got censored for a short period of time, but then it came back.
But that might have been something to do with
her ex-porn.
Yeah, some of the things she said and stuff. So who knows?
She didn't say
much. But it came back. So
I mean, we say worse things.
Yep, probably. Safe takes Cialis if you're positive for COVID. Yes, it is. Some COVID deniers, people have rodeos and pretending COVID isn't a thing. Yeah, TS, I mean, how could you pretend COVID isn't a thing? I mean, that's kind of a weird,
TS was getting in trouble from other
TS was
people
actually,
on
TS
YouTube.
was kind of reasonable. He started off with a head of steam, but he was kind of reasonable. and
we love our semi-trolls.
yeah, I don't mind trolls that become part of the discourse. Yeah, but what was I saying? That lost my train of thought.
Don't piss off
That's
the
COVID.
mommies.
Yeah. All right, listen, let's wrap this thing up. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We're going to be later in the day all week, pretty much. Right, Susan? So like 4 o'clock. Actually, tomorrow maybe more like 5 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Okay, 6 o'clock.
And then
Fine.
Wednesday, it's early. We'll do an Ask Dr. Drew. We'll be taking questions on Clubhouse.
Is that 3 or 2:30?
That'll be at 2 o'clock, I think.
2 o'clock. I'm moving my
And then
stuff.
Thursday is 4 o'clock, and Friday is, I want to say noon. We're all over the place. I'll give you notifications at locals.com. Go to drdrew.locals.com and sign up, and you'll get notified and help support the show. Or just look on our Twitter or Instagram. We'll put it out there and give you the times.
Okay, excellent.
We're kind of moving around a little bit this week, so you can catch up.
Yes, indeed. I'm looking also, the Friday will probably be right in the middle of the day. But any event, a lot coming up this week. We appreciate your support. We appreciate the conversation, and we will see you tomorrow. Anyone who's watched me over the years knows that I'm obsessed with Hydrolite. In my opinion, the best oral rehydration product on the market. I literally use it every day. My family uses it. When I had COVID, I'm telling you, Hydrolite contributed to my recovery, kept me hydrated. Now, with things finally reopening back around the country, the potential exposure to the common cold is always around. And like always, Hydrolite has got your back. Hydrolite Plus Immunity, my new favorite, starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of great ingredients. Plus, each single-serving easy-pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 300 milligrams of elderberry extract. Hydrolite Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy-to-pour sticks that rapidly dissolve in water, make a great-tasting drink, has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink, uses all-natural flavors, gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and even vegan. Hydrolite Plus Immunity is also now available in ready-to-drink bottles at the Walmart next to the pharmacy, or as always, you can find it by visiting hydrolite.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that is HYDRALYTE.com/DRDREW. Be sure to use the code Dr. Drew 25 for a special discount. I am so grateful for our friends at Blue Microphones. Not only have they completely changed what our show sounds like, they've given me headphones so I can monitor things better. This is the mic for millions of creative people, and now I know why. I'm so grateful for them completely changing the quality of our audio. You'll find Blue mics like Yeti and the Mouse, which we're using here, both in pro studios and home studios, literally all over the world. Their popular Yeti caster is a Blue Yeti microphone, plus a boom arm system that's behind many of your favorite podcasts. I run into them all the time, and now I know why. If you've ever thought about creating your own podcast or YouTube channel, Blue can make you sound and look great. Just visit bluemic.com and click Get Started, and you can start telling your story.
Now, a team of 6 investigators are on a double mission.
We're going to go deeper and farther than almost anyone has ever gone.
To find out if Akakur and Akahim are real,
There's no way that this is a natural structure.
and to discover what happened to the missing and murdered explorers.
There was a big hole in the back of his head.